Howard Lutnick, you suck. No, seriously, you really suck.
So MeidasTouch just highlighted a Canadian MP's brutal takedown of Trump's Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, and it's absolutely devastating. We're seeing unprecedented diplomatic warfare as Trump tries to extort our closest ally before USMCA renegotiations even begin. This exposes everything wrong with gangster diplomacy.
Canada is absolutely furious at Donald Trump and his despicable regime, and they are not holding back as the United States is trying to threaten Canada heading into these CUSMA negotiations, the Canadian-United States-Mexico agreement.
USMCA replaced NAFTA in 2020, and it's not supposed to be renegotiated until 2026. But Trump's demanding upfront concessions just to sit at the table. That's not negotiation, that's extortion. No administration has ever demanded allies pay tribute before trade talks.
The United States is trying to extort Canada that if you even want to have the privilege of negotiating with us, you need to pay to play and make all of these concessions for us to even consider a renewal of CUSMA. Otherwise, we are going to try to harm your country and inflict more economic pain.
This breaks 250 years of U.S.-Canada diplomatic norms. Even during the War of 1812, we negotiated in good faith afterward. Demanding concessions before talks is literally mob tactics. Nice country you got there. Shame if something happened to it.
We've had demonstrated to you already that when we are ready to fight back, we're going to win this. Look at the Canadian boycott against United States products, services, and tourism into the United States. Canada is ready to fight. This has the Trump regime running scared.
That Canadian boycott cost New Hampshire alone $300 million in tourism revenue in 2025. Jim Beam's Kentucky distillery laid off 800 workers. This isn't government imposed, it's organic grassroots fury. When your own citizens boycott you, you've lost the moral high ground completely.
You know, Howard Lutnick is like, oh, Canada sucks, man. Canada sucks. Like, why are they even doing this? To which Senator Shaheen from New Hampshire is like, because you're threatening its sovereignty, because you keep on mocking it, because you impose unlawful tariffs against it, because you constantly launch these phony pretextual investigations against Canada trade in order to justify your atrocities.
Senator Shaheen represents New Hampshire, where Canadian tourists spend $1.2 billion annually. She's watching Trump's mouth destroy her state's economy. The phony trade investigations reference is spot on. Trump weaponizes bureaucracy to justify predetermined tariffs on allies.
I just want to lay out a bit of what's happening so we can look at the frame of the global situation and what it means for Canada and the United States right now. What Donald Trump has created in Iran is more than just a global dumpster fire. The cascade effects of the chaos that he's created will cause serious damage to the world economy.
The Iran crisis has oil at $95 per barrel and fertilizer prices up 40%. This is exactly when you need stable allies, not trade wars. Trump's alienating Canada while global supply chains are already fragile. It's economic suicide during a crisis.
We're already seeing fuel shortages in Europe, shortages across Asia. What also needs to be looked at is the crisis that's coming in food, because a good percentage of the world's fertilizer comes through the Strait. And it will affect countries like Sri Lanka, Sudan, Central Africa, across Asia, that will cause massive increases in food prices, which will have a massive impact on the economy and, of course, the danger of starvation.
20% of global fertilizer transits the Strait of Hormuz. Food prices in developing nations have spiked 25% since January. Starting a trade war with your agricultural partner during a global food crisis is criminally negligent. People will literally starve.
This is gangster economics. We're not surprised. We've been saying this on Midas Canada from day one. This is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a gangster regime. They want us to pay them in order to negotiate a trade agreement. So
exactly right. This is protection racket economics. International trade law prohibits demanding tribute before negotiations. The WTO has clear rules against this, but Trump treats allies like mafia territory. It's unprecedented in modern diplomatic history.
So last year when Prime Minister Carney came in, he agreed to cut the digital services tax, which was giving up Canadian sovereignty over digital taxes to ensure that the big giants like Facebook paid a fair share, or even some share, of taxes to the Canadian economy. Prime Minister Carney gave that up as an act of goodwill. And what did we get back? We got back insults, threats, and Donald Trump saying he's demanding more.
Canada's digital services tax would have made tech giants pay 3% on Canadian revenue, perfectly legal under international law. Trudeau suspended it as a goodwill gesture, giving up sovereignty to appease Trump. The reward? More insults and demands.
At the same time, we're learning there's a massive offshore political psyops operation trying to undermine and break Canada, that millions and millions of online views from sites claiming to be pro-Alberta separatists are being pumped into Canada. This is the Brexit playbook. This is the standard, the Russian operations. This is the United States.
Alberta separatist content has exploded 400% since 2024, mostly from U.S. IP addresses. It's identical to Brexit disinformation, amplifying regional grievances to fracture allied nations. Putin perfected this playbook. Trump adopted it against democracies worldwide.
To invoke a general who defended Canada against a military threat from the United States on the eve of trade negotiations, I think is pretty provocative. But this is a message that Mark Carney was delivering to Canadians to say, be ready. And he did say that. He said, we've been through tough times before. We will get through this.
General Isaac Brock defeated American invasion attempts in 1812 at Queenston Heights. Invoking him before trade talks sends a clear message. Canada has defended itself against American aggression before and will again. That's not diplomatic language. That's a warning.
What really makes them angry, why they shout and call us losers and why they insult us, is because we haven't broke and we are not going to break, and Canada will never break. And I think what Prime Minister Carney was telling us this week is that we've stood up before against incredible odds, and we fought back, and we will fight back again.
Trump's playbook requires submission from targets. When allies refuse to break, he escalates. More insults, more threats, more chaos. Canada's resistance threatens the entire intimidation model. If allies don't fold, the whole strategy collapses.
I feel the need to bring this message to you on behalf of the people of Canada who work hard, who play fair, who do their part to build a good society, and they wake up in the morning and they see you on TV insulting our nation and pushing us around and thinking we're like these scrawny kids who are going to give you our lunch money.
That lunch money analogy is perfect. Playground bullying scaled to international relations. Canadian families wake up seeing their country mocked by supposed allies. It's personal now, which makes the boycott impossible to stop through government channels.
As a trade negotiator, you suck big time. As a human being, you really suck. And we're going to talk about that. I know it's not comfortable talk for you, but we got to go through there. And then we're going to talk about you as a guy who's supposed to represent the best interests of the American people. On that, you super suck.
This three-part destruction is methodical: incompetent negotiator, morally compromised person, terrible American representative. The Epstein revelations are coming, and they're going to demolish whatever credibility Lutnick thinks he has left.
So we are on the verge of renegotiating Kuzma, the North American Free Trade Deal, the biggest trade agreement basically in the world that creates $1 trillion in reciprocal trade between the United States and Canada every single year. That you sell 3 times more products into Canada than you do from China, and that we are a bigger exporter into the United States than China. And yet you say that we suck.
Canada buys $429 billion in U.S. goods annually. China buys $151 billion. Canada is literally our biggest customer, not China. Lutnick's insulting our most profitable relationship while obsessing over our least reliable one. It's economically insane.
Because what that's done is given serious backbone to our Prime Minister, and woe to any political leader in Canada who does try and give you concessions, because the Canadian people now are paying really close attention to these negotiations, and they're seriously pissed, and they want to give you sweet F all because you're just such a jerk.
Brilliant point. Public insults make compromise political suicide for Canadian leaders. Behind-the-scenes pressure might work, but televised humiliation forces them to stand firm. Trump turned private negotiation into public theater, destroying his own leverage.
Now, as a human being, tell us about that photo of Epstein Island, because, I've been reading about your claims about knowing Epstein, and it just doesn't make sense. So in 2005, you find out Epstein's your next door neighbor. So fair enough, you and your wife go over to visit your neighbor. Perfectly normal, I'd say, I guess, for people who live next door to millionaires like Epstein.
The Epstein timeline matters because Lutnick's story keeps changing. First, he barely knew him. Then he was creeped out. Now, photos surface from Epstein Island. Each revision destroys credibility. If he lies about this, what else is false?
And you said that when you got the tour, you were incredibly creeped out because he was making these creepy sexual innuendos. And you said, and in the 6 to 8 steps it takes to get from his house to my house, my wife and I decided I would never be in the room with that disgusting person ever again.
This sounds completely reasonable. Normal person meets neighbor, gets creeped out, vows never to return. 6 to 8 steps from Epstein's house to his own. That detail makes it feel authentic. But then the photos surfaced.
And then the Epstein files dropped and we saw your picture at Epstein Island. So then you had to admit, oh, right. Yeah, in 2012, you called him up and went to hang out with him on the island. And you said, quote, my wife was with me, as were my 4 children and nannies. And I had another couple that were there as well with their children.
He voluntarily called Epstein in 2012 and brought his 4 children to a pedophile's island. After being creeped out by sexual innuendos 7 years earlier. That's not poor judgment. That's either lying about being creeped out or endangering his own kids.
Why would you bring your children, dude, to be in the presence of a man that you thought was so disgusting you would never be in the same room with him again, and yet you showed up at his island and brought your kids?
Exactly. There's no good answer here. Either Lutnick lied about being disgusted with Epstein, or he knowingly exposed his children to a predator. Both scenarios disqualify him from representing American interests. It's a logical trap with no escape.
The American people who were being hammered from the Canadian boycott, not our government boycott, but the ordinary Canadians who refuse to spend $1 in the United States because of the constant threats and insults. The traffic to tourist destinations is down 35%. It's cost billions of dollars. It shut the Jim Beam distillery down.
Jim Beam laid off 800 Kentucky workers because Canadians won't buy American whiskey anymore. New Hampshire ski resorts are hemorrhaging money. These aren't abstract trade statistics. They're American jobs lost because Lutnick can't keep his mouth shut.
In my home state of New Hampshire, tourism is the second largest industry, both by revenue, and it supports 70,000 jobs. Canada has long been our largest share of foreign visitors, but last year we saw a 30% drop in Canadian tourism, largely due to the loss of trust and goodwill because of this administration's rhetoric around Canada.
70,000 New Hampshire jobs depend on tourism, and Canada provided 40% of foreign visitors pre-Trump. That 30% drop represents real families losing income, while Lutnick plays tough guy on TV. He's destroying American livelihoods to feed his ego.
Secretary Lutnick, last week, you said about Canada's economic strategy, and I quote, "They suck." I believe your spokesperson then said this was about Canada's economy leeching off of the U.S. How does insulting our closest ally and neighbor help the businesses in my state of New Hampshire and states all across this country who are hurting because of the loss of Canadian business and tourism?
Perfect question. There's literally no answer that helps Americans. Insulting Canada costs U.S. jobs, damages the economy, and accomplishes nothing positive. Shaheen's representing her constituents against their own administration's self-destructive stupidity.
We have all those Canadian visitors who are not coming because of your comments and comments by the administration. How does that help our economy?
Shaheen's doing what Trump should do, representing American workers. Instead, Lutnick prioritizes ego over economics, rhetoric over results. American families suffer, so he can sound tough on TV. It's the opposite of putting America first.
Wow, man, you are so arrogant. You are so out of touch. You really don't give a damn about the damage that you're doing. Fair play. Come to the negotiating table.
That's the frustration of dealing with ideological extremists. They literally don't care about consequences. Lutnick sees economic damage and shrugs. Fair play used to be automatic with allies. Now it's a radical request.
They are so done with your attitude. They are so done with your arrogance. And they are so done with being nice. Because you know what, Howard Lutnick? You suck.
Canada spent decades being polite while Trump trampled diplomatic norms. They tried goodwill gestures, got insults. Tried economic pressure, got threats. When diplomacy fails and patience runs out, sometimes you just tell the truth. Howard Lutnick sucks.